Míle maith, and I don't welcome the opportunity to talk again because I don't have the word welcome. And I just looked back and I welcome the directive. And I welcome that we're opting into the directive, and I welcome that that will give us a voice in the final drafting of the directive, and that it's going to do away with the gap that's there in relation to effective legislation, where there's a patchwork of legal instruments. And there are positive things in the directive, and I have absolutely no difficulty supporting that. Where I do have a little difficulty again is with my cynicism at this point, and it's a luxury that I can't have as a politician, because one stands here to tell people things can be done and things can change. And your speech, thank you very much for it, and it's very comprehensive, and it sets out lots of legislative background and the significance of just after UK's departure that we're the sole country with an Article 21 protocol. I thank you for all of that. What I take exception to is that you say, however, shifts in long-held mindsets and changes in behaviour do not occur over weeks or even months, and we need to continue to work as much as possible. Now, we didn't ask for anything overnight, and I've referred to this repeatedly. This is the task force a quarter of a century ago. Edna Fitzgerald was the minister at the time. An excellent report, highlighted all the things that needed to be done and highlighted how they should be done. And unfortunately, that never happened, Minister. Again, I realise you're bona fides and you've confirmed it repeatedly here in the Dáil. But arising from that, that was 97. That was 20 years after the first refuge came into being in Ireland, and that was after a huge struggle by women on the ground. None of the services for women, for domestic violence or gender-based violence, has ever been proactive. It has come on the backs of women and children and indeed good men, and they're suffering. And so this task force back in 97, a quarter of a century ago, was supposed to change everything. And they set out that a strategy was needed. The one thing that jumps out for me amongst the recommendations is programmes for violent men that confront violent behaviour must be developed and expanded. That's a quarter of a century ago. And I think that is one of the major aspects that we haven't even begun to deal with. And I've mentioned in this Dáil the collaborative effort between the Rape Crisis Centre and the Manuela project in Galway in terms of rolling out to the schools an educational project. And I think I gave you some details of that, and I'm not sure what follow-up there has been in relation to it. And I apologise for my cynicism, but it's difficult because following on from that, many promises were given. And finally, there were 3 items, part of the Trinity: the audit of interdepartmental structures, which we finally got, thank you. And that identified how fragmented the services had been. The second national strategy ran from 2016 to 21. The Department of Justice, the audit of structures, found a lack of effective oversight of implementation of the second strategy, a fragmented approach, a lack of action on decades of recommendation. Oversight responsibility was held by an interdepartmental senior officials group, which is nominally accountable to the Cabinet, but in practice has never reported. Now, that's the second strategy, and I could name many other things as well. So now we have 2 parts of the Trinity: the audit generally that I've mentioned and the audit on structures, and we're still waiting on the third national strategy. Now, your words are it was due at the end of last year, end of 21. Then that was changed to end of March. It's coming in the next few weeks. And as each TD asks, we're told it's coming soon, and we're still told it's coming soon. So if you could be bluntly honest with us, what is the delay in producing the strategy before we ever even begin to talk about the implementation of the strategy? What is causing the delay 6 months after the other strategy has run out, and given the history and given the serious crimes being committed, perpetuated on a daily basis against women and children watching it? if I have to have trust in you, Minister, and I told you I would work with you, then words have to mean something. When will the strategy be published? What has caused the delay? Please, I won't go over time.
Thank you. Minister.
Deputies, I think for what is unanimous support for the opting into this motion. I have said at the outset, really, I suppose it's absolutely vital that we opt in, not just to show that we are absolutely committed to dealing with this issue, but also to make sure at the very outset that we are part of the discussion, the conversation, any changes that may be necessary as this protocol is developed, as legislation is developed, and obviously that it can work for our own legislation here and our own legislative basis. In terms of, I suppose, more generally, there is a lot of work happening, and maybe to your point, Deputy, the strategy will be published with an implementation plan, so it's not that we would publish the strategy and then have to work it out. What we have now and what is complete, and we were just in the final stages in terms of signing off on the very last elements, so we are talking in the next week, 2 weeks, essentially of being published, is a very detailed implementation plan with dates, with actions, departments as who are carrying out those actions, funding and all of that. So it will be very clearly set out, and it will take into account all of the things that you've mentioned, the audit, the restructuring that's needed, I suppose the drive that we need to implement those changes. But I think what's different about this is that it's not a strategy without the implementation plan. It will have all of that together. So I appreciate it's taken longer than people would like. It is a whole of government strategy. There's quite a lot of departments involved, and I think everybody would appreciate that when you have so many departments involved, but also when you go out to consultation a number of times with the public and others, because you want to get it right, it does unfortunately delay things. So it will be published very soon, as I said, in a matter of literally weeks, absolutely before the Dáil is finished, but probably in the next 2 weeks. And then just, I suppose more generally, obviously there's a lot of work that is underway anyway, irrespective of the strategy, some of which deputies have mentioned. So again, I thank deputies for their support. Appreciate it. Again, this is another opt-in that has come at short notice, but we are not given, I suppose, too much time to be able to pass these through the houses. But it is really important, particularly where we have already opted into the Istanbul Convention, where there are countries who have not yet ratified it or indeed considering pulling out, that we show leadership in this regard and that we are around the table and that we are seen to be leading in what is such an important issue, as I think all deputies have identified here. Thank you.